welcome to CPD,
Trent Mongero with Nate Trosky here.
a weekly show dedicated to meeting the needs of the aspiring amateur player in pursuit of college and professional baseball. Hi, I'm Nate Trosky. Welcome to CPD. I'm in studio with a new double play combo. We got Trent Mongero. Trent's out with his high school team. They're up and running, Tony. So we have Tony Hildy also with Trosky Ranch. So Tony, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super fired up with our guest tonight. He's someone I've looked up to for years, and what an honor and privilege it is for us to have this guy.
You know, it is an honor, and I've had the privilege to know Tom House. It's Tom House, our guest tonight, our professional guest, and Tom pitched 8.5 years in the big leagues, and he had a winning record, which is not easy to do, and he also had a sub-4 ERA. So our hats off to Big Tom. Then he went into the game, coaching at the major league level as well. And Nolan Ryan was one of his students. And then he went on to Division I baseball, and he started research. He's been researching for years. And, I've been with the Brewers for over 20 years, and we spent a lot of time at SC's with the area codes and also just working together with SC. And I've had the opportunity to get to know Tom personally. And Tom always spent time, and, my memory with Tom, and so excited to have him back, was, every time I went to SC, I would sneak. Literally, I'm doing the camps with Chad Kruder and all these guys, and I would sneak out of my station to get up to hear Tom. And by the way, I heard Tom speak probably like 200 times, and it didn't matter because it was always good. And the notes, you can never get enough. So Tom is one of the most intelligent, if not, and I coined him as maybe the most intelligent baseball man to ever live because of his dedication, because of his science background. He has a PhD, he has 2 master's degree, and it's truly from his heart, and he's done what no one's done. So we're honored. And Tom, we're honored to introduce you here when we come back after our break. And another, coach that I put in that mix is a very intelligent, one of the top is Jerry Weinstein. We had Jerry on our show about a month ago. So honored to have Tom and Tony. We're excited. I know you're excited too, brother. We have Tom House, Dr. Tom House, and Tom pitched in the big leagues. He coached in the big leagues. He's, the number one pitching research, men in the country. And over the years, Tom's really laid the ground for, the development of the pitcher and studying the delivery. And not only pitching, you're talking about before the break, Tom working with Tom Brady and many other quarterbacks. So Tom, I want to welcome you to the show. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Tony and Nate. I appreciate it. It'll be fun hanging out for these next few minutes.
Yeah, we're gonna have a great time. And Tom, my latest memory was at SC, and we were getting ready for area code stuff, and you had Tim Tebow over there on the football practice field, which is right next to the baseball field. So you had Tebow over there, and you were working with him. And Tebow walked into the clubhouse. I think you guys took a break, and I've never seen a human being so large. I mean, his shoulders were he looked like he had 2 sets of shoulder pads on. What was, when I watched him throw, his arm action really wasn't I would say, textbook. Anything on Tebow that we can learn and anything about his baseball experience, because I think it's so interesting. He went into the baseball world. People were wondering if he even had a chance. Any comments on that?
Yeah, there are windows of trainability that are age specific, and Tim represented a perfect example. What Tebow represented to me was a quarterback who didn't get to throw as much as he should have through college and high school. And when he got to the professional ranks, he was probably 10,000 passes throwing behind any other quarterback of his age. So he was playing catch up.
Tom, our last memory with you, you were working with NFL quarterbacks. You're at SC actually as a Division I pitching coach and doing your research there, following being a major league pitching coach in an 8.5 year big leaguer. So I remember you're over there with Tim Tebow, and what was that all about? Mr. Tebow, he was the biggest human I think I've ever seen. His shoulders were absolutely ginormous.
Well, your memory is spot on, because he basically was a linebacker that played quarterback. But what Tim represented for me was a perfect example of a quarterback that didn't get enough throwing in his career. So when he finally got to the NFL, and his accuracy wasn't what it should be, his mechanics weren't as efficient as they should have been. He started palling around with us because throwing a football and throwing a baseball are virtually the same kinematic sequence, the same basic skill. And his issues with never becoming a number one weren't that he couldn't be a number one. He just didn't have enough throwing under his belt leading into the time that he should have been able to do it at the NFL level on Sundays. So a perfect example of, not only do you have to teach the right thing, but it has to be taught in a timely fashion. So that's what Tim Tebow represented. And then because we're all involved with baseball, you know how hard it is to hit. And Tim, again, when he decided he wanted to play baseball, all his pieces were there, but he hadn't had enough swings to be a big league hitter. It wasn't that he couldn't hit a curveball. He hadn't seen enough curveballs to be able to hit it on a major league level. So he hit the crease inefficiently and was never quite in his windows of learnability. He didn't have enough reps either throwing the football or swinging the bat to be any more than a kind of a AAA and a half or back up on the NFL stage.
Crazy awesome. How did you see? It seemed like he willed himself to get to where he was at, but Nate and I have been talking a lot about the throwing motion, and you touched on a piece that I think is really interesting from my end, is how similar it is of throwing a football and throwing a baseball, and famously right now you're the throwing coach for Tom Brady, but Nate and I have talked extensively about probably the top 5 throwers in the NFL were baseball guys and high-end baseball guys.
Yeah. And I heard, Tony, I heard you mention earlier, whether it was off camera or not, the shortstop that are quarterbacks in the NFL. Playing shortstop and quarterback in the NFL are virtually the same thing. Pitching is a little bit different timing, but the physical movements to throw a baseball once the front foot gets down are the same exactly as the movements involved to throw a football. So if you can teach pitching and throwing a baseball, you could also teach quarterbacking. And correct me if I'm wrong, you were a quarterback at Boise State. Yep. All right, so you probably have experienced this intuitively. Throwing a baseball from shortstop is the same as throwing a football.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting to me. We talk about Nolan Ryan, and Nate touched on Nolan Ryan, and famously he would throw a football on his off days, and if I remember right, he would throw football even pregame.
Yeah, your memory is again spot on. We found early on that throwing a football as a pitcher, you couldn't throw it wrong mechanically and make it spiral. So you knew feedback immediately. If you threw the football and it spiraled, you know that your timing, your sequencing, and your mechanical efficiency was right where it belonged. A football is also 3 times as heavy as a baseball. So there's some strength training involved with it also. It was a really good cross-specific training device. So I took a lot of crap for it. They kind of made fun of not just me, but all of us with the Texas Rangers. It's the same when I was the coach with the Padres. But throwing a football is now accepted across the board, and especially since shortstops are becoming as good as quarterbacks they are right away at the NFL and collegiate level.
That's awesome. What really got you into pursuing the research end of baseball and more specifically the throwing mechanics?
Well, I'd like to say it was well thought out and planned. It kind of happened organically. As a pitcher, I was always a low end guy. I was good in high school and pretty good in college, but when I signed professionally, every year that I played, I was always the 9th, 10th man on a 10-man pitching staff. So I was always inquiring why, what do I need to do here and why? And I really couldn't get very many answers that made sense to me. So when I was released as a player and decided I wanted to be a coach, and this is something that I know that is, Nate and I have talked about this. When you're teaching a kid something, you have this thing in your stomach and you go, man, I hope this is right. I hope what I'm trying to help this kid with will actually work. Well, because of that feeling, whenever I ran across something that I thought could help me evaluate pitchers better with what my eyes were seeing and what my body was telling me, I pursued it. And when I found out that motion analysis could actually help the human eye see much more than what we were perceiving, our eyes lie to us. What we think we see with a movement of a throw or a swing isn't really what happens, because we can only see about 32 to 40 frames a second. And what takes place when you swing a bat or throw a baseball, it's 1/250th to 1/600th of a second. So when motion analysis technology presented itself, I took a second mortgage on the house, bought a system, and you're laughing right on. What didn't make my wife real happy, but we started capturing athletes throwing, jumping, swinging, whatever we could do. And I'll be honest with you, I probably sat for a full year looking at our data capture and wondered what the hell I was looking at. And then finally one day I asked myself the right question, and there in front of me was an answer. And that became, the beginnings of our model on throwing, which I still think, well, I know for a fact it's the best throwing model that's out there right now.
So I've been studying quarterback. I mean, you enlightened me on it over, 20 years ago. And, you had Nolan throwing the football. So I followed suit we've been throwing the football for over 20 years. I have over 50 in bins. And when we go out even to our scout games, we roll out footballs and we do some light dumbbell band work. And then we get the arms hot. And when we throw the football for a good 7-8 minutes, couple of questions. One, I'd like to ask you how you utilize the football. That would be one question. Another question is, when you see infielders separate in the center of their chest, any thrower really does, right? The separation happens in the center. And we see that with quarterbacks, they're kind of relaxed, and they separate. Now, when the hand separates, some of these quarterbacks, we actually see them going down for extra length. Is that something that you do not prefer? Because from the infield, we don't really want that length. And from the catchers, we don't want any extra length. We usually exit the center to a parallel arm position in that V position. And then we usually just work up. Now we see some quarterbacks actually working down, not all of them, but we see a handful getting a little extra down there. And is that sloppy, or does that even matter?
All right, Nate, that's a great question. And I'm glad we're actually going face to face on this, because I have a little bit better understanding of the movement and a little bit better teach right now. So the teach goes like this: the quicker your feet, the quicker your release. So when a quarterback has a tendency to get long, run from his arm, or take too much time to get rid of the football, instead of trying to fix their arm action, which is genetically predisposed, if you quicken up their feet, they can't have a long arm. So rather than try to re-teach arm action, we can actually, with one quick thing, if you have quick feet, you're going to be quick with your release. Now there's things in between there, but we have over the years have determined that what a kid does when he throws a rock, a baseball, a football, or a softball, his genetic arm action belongs to him. If you want to quicken it up, you don't make a change in his arm. What you do is make a change in the quickness of his feet.
And Tom, not only a specialist as a former Major League pitcher, former Major League pitching coach, but also working with Tom Brady and some of the best quarterbacks the game has known. And you recently were working with Tom. Is that right, Tom? As he was preparing with the Buccaneers?
Yeah, I've had my two main guys in the last, with Drew Brees, it's been the last 18 years, and with Tom Brady, it's been the last 9 years. They're the only ones that I'm really going one-on-one with, The other quarterbacks, we've got 28 of the top 32 NFL quarterbacks up at 3D QB with Adam Dedeaux, John Beck up in Orange County. So we work with a lot of quarterbacks, but the thing people don't realize is that throwing a football, throwing a baseball, throwing a softball, all pretty much the same thing. And the thing that's getting a lot of attention right now is the fact that Brady is probably going to throw past age 45. And what we figured out with Nolan Ryan and other Ranger pitchers when I was there is there's no reason you can't do at age 45 what you did at age 25 if you follow this very strict process, protocol, and regimen. So Nolan pitched effectively. The last pitch he threw at age 47 years old in Seattle was 97 miles an hour. So that's a superstar. But Jamie Moyer pitched till he was 48 with a fastball like I had. He was 82 to 83. So we have proven through our research that if you pay attention to your window of trainability, there's a nerve window, a muscle window, a skill acquisition window, and a skill retention window. There's no reason an athlete can't figure out how to be efficient as a 10-year-old and how to stay efficient as a 45-year-old. That's where the research has gone, the science has gone. And as I look around right now, there's more technology out there helping young coaches than there's ever been. So as frustrated as people get with the games, I think sports are on the right track.
What is the actual mission when you're working with Tom Brady? What do you actually offer to him that he doesn't get in the NFL? So why does he come to you? You have the baseball background, throwing. So why does the mental game, you know it all, actually, so what is it, what is his purpose for coming to see Tom House?
Well, as it turns out, everybody shows up wanting to improve their mechanics. That seems like to be the universal request. I want my mechanics to be better. But when someone comes to us for mechanical efficiency evaluation, we also include functional strength training. We also include nutrition and sleep for recovery. And then we add in mental emotional management skills. And those are the four things, when you put them together, allow an elite athlete to stay top form and continue to try to get better at something every day. And people ask, what is the unique thing about these Hall of Famer / superstars? And it's this genetic predisposition to try to get better at something every day. And that's kind of what I believe I represent to Tom Brady and Drew Brees, is obviously we've developed a friendship, but they also know that they can get quantified, statistically validated, science-based information and instruction without opinion and without any bias whenever they ask the question. So they have this ongoing thing to get better every day. And again, you prepare, you compete, you recover, and you repeat. And what we've been able to do, and what I'm seeing you guys do also, you have something to add to any athlete at any age with something from one of those four pillars. Did that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And what it seems to be is that these athletes are drawn to you. I mean, Tom Brady, you're talking about a lifestyle. You're talking about the full circle. And the Japanese culture, they call it kokoro. And basically what it is it's the complete mind, body, spirit. And it sounds, because I heard of Tom's sleeping habits, his nutritional habits. Well, ever since I met you 20 years ago at SC, you've been talking about this stuff for years. So I would assume that you introduced some of this to Tom and he took hold and that's helped him.
And remember, Nate, I don't have any original ideas, but I'll borrow someone else's idea and give it an application to whoever I'm working with. And that basically putting the aggregate of all those seemingly unrelated parts together in a teach that will actually help your athlete get better. I think that's that we do with the group I work with this Mustard app we're putting out, with what I'm doing with 3D QB, and with what I'm doing with the National Pitching Association. All those really smart young people and the research that goes with it are designed to get as much as we possibly can to the athletes we're working with. We master information, we master instruction, we mentor a kid, and hopefully make a difference in his life.
Can you
One-
tell us a little bit about what you got going on? Some
Okay,
of the new stuff you're
specifically,
doing you'd like to
yeah,
share?
probably, and Nate, you've known me for a long time. I think what we're doing with this Mustard app is the best thing I've ever done. And without getting too big of words going on, we're trying to democratize to the 100 million young athletes that are out there in the world and give them the same instruction and information that our elite guys get. So everything that you and I are talking about right now, everything you and I have been doing for the last 25, 30 years, it's now programmed into a cell phone where a mom, a dad, or a Little League coach can film their athlete throwing or swinging. And it literally goes into the cloud, and within 1 minute comes back with a report card that says, okay, based on our variables, this is good, you need help with your opposite and equal, your timing is a little slow into foot strike, whatever the assessment is that needs work on, it's right there in the palm of their hand. And then we have, for every fault that they have, every fix that they need, we've got a deliverable, a teach that either trains or patterns the muscles in the nervous system to improve their skill. So again, it's putting in a mom and a dad's hands for their 12-year-old athlete everything that you and I have been doing with our elite guys. And okay, I couldn't read your writing. So
No, that was for Tony. Because I want Tony to talk to you about how the people can find this. What are we
Okay.
doing?
So if it's really easy, if they're interested, which I think they should be, if they just went to teammustard.com. That's TEAM and then mustard, just like my hand, without any vowels. Teammustard.com, and it'll kind of get everybody started. And we're winding up beta testing right now. The efficacy of the instrument, Nate, it's right up there. I'm so proud of the people that are around me being able to take what's been floating around in my brain and actually turn it into something that is usable by anybody that has a cell phone. So we mentioned
That's awesome.
earlier how hard it is to find coaches. Here's a way for a coach to actually get in and have some help with the best information and instruction that exists in the world. And it will help him democratize or humanize right away his interaction with his kids.
Awesome. When we close the show today, we'll make another special note to remind our listeners about. It's the Mustard app, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Mustard
And
app, super.
it emphasizes, real quick, forgive me for getting long-winded, but what we try to do is make people aware the power of play. And if we can get kids to understand that playing sports, not working sports, is what we're after.
Tom, can you touch up at all on something that I heard about a year and a half ago? I was at the Oregon State camp, and they were actually talking about the trainer was just saying this 30-degree back angle is kind of like an optimum position for everything in athletics. And no matter what you do, pretty much that's your athletic position. So Tony and I brought that up to Tony, and we basically paid special attention over the last year, watching every mover. And pretty much what it seems is that the body organizes itself to about a 30-degree back angle. If I'm an infielder, if I'm a pitcher, if I'm a hitter, if I'm a golfer, if I'm a bowler, I mean, it seems like it's across the board. Is there anything you can touch up on, kind of like that athletic position where the body seems to kind of organize itself on its own?
What you're describing is what we call energy angle. And remember, sports are about absorbing energy, directing energy, and delivering energy. And when you put your posture and your balance 30 degrees off of vertical relative to your feet, then when you move, you're going to move forward more efficiently. If your head has to go up or down, right or left, or away before you start forward, then your energy angle is inefficient. And again, without getting too crazy, what you're doing is managing your vectors. The human head weighs 7% of body weight. Each arm is 3.5% of body weight. Each leg is 20% of body weight. And you want your core vector, basically your alpha vector, which is 46% of body weight, and all the extremities going forward.
Tom, we were talking about the 30-degree back angle. You call it the energy angle, which is basically the true athletic position, right? And the body seems to want to find that position. Is there, if an athlete starts out of that position and he has to find it before he moves, is that actually a wasted motion where it might actually lose the efficiency of movement that he wants to find? Maybe as an infielder
exactly
going right to left.
Okay. Nate, you're exactly right. Remember we said it's sports are angles, distance, and time. You want to cut the angle, cut the distance, and cut the time. If an athlete can't find that athletic position, that energy angle of 30 degrees, then his subconscious mind is going to virtually force him to before he actually performs his skill. So you watch when people field ground balls, you watch when they field fly balls, you watch a pitcher when he's throwing toward home plate, you watch a hitter when he takes his stride. He's going to create head over center of gravity to where when he initiates the movement, he can only go straight with that movement, not right or left, not up or down, not east or west.
Tom, let's get into the mental game. Over the last 20 years, I've made it a priority in my coaching, and I've been interviewing countless people. I've got to listen to you for over 5 years. You talked probably over 50 times. Like I said, I would kind of sneak out of my hitting group or my fielding group, and I'd run up there to get to hear you up in the basically in the clubhouse, kind of the trophy room there at USC. And about a year and a half ago, I was in Texas, and I was we had a big league pitching coach. His son was at camp. So he's sitting there and he goes, I said, hey, you want to help out? He says, sure. He says, yeah, I'm a big league pitching coach with so-and-so team. And I said, oh, that's cool, man. And we were talking, we're doing mental game the whole time, doing all the timing stuff we're talking about. He said, man, when he left camp, by the way, Tom, he goes, I learned so much about throwing that I had no clue about. And also the mental game, which we were talking about the timing, right? Quick feet gives you a quick arm, right? Cleans up the funk in the arm stroke. So we were doing that with all of the kids, including his kids, and we treat everybody as a shortstop. So we're all throwing like shortstops, no matter who you are. And he was like, thank you, Nate. I appreciate it. And we got to know each other well. And he said, I said, let me ask you something. How many guys on your pitching staff have their minds right? I go, I'm working on some stuff for pitchers right now. It's actually a mantra before they leave the dugout. It's actually where you actually put your hand into a handprint, and then you say a mantra before you take it. And you do that before every inning. And it's a piece. And we came up with it. I had most of it completed, and he helped me with it. And he was talking about Notre Dame, how they go out and they touch, right? And I said, well, there's power in touch. Just saying something oftentimes are empty words. So if you actually touch, you connect at a whole other level. And then if you see something, you also can connect at another level. So we created this mantra that goes in the dugout. And he said, you know, Nate, I would say one of my pitchers on my staff regularly had their minds right. And it's usually the opening day starter. That guy usually is at another level. But he said, all the pitchers on my staff, including myself, because I pitched 10 years in professional baseball, and there was only 1 year I had my mind right. And that year I dominated. Yeah. Nothing changed with my delivery. He goes, but I didn't hope and think anymore. I knew. I committed to every pitch, and I attacked on every pitch. And he said, it was the only time in my career. Now, ever since that conversation, I interviewed and spoke with countless big league pitchers and major league scouts, and all of them said, my mind was never right. I didn't know how to get it right. So I want to ask you, you know, from your experience as a major league pitcher and also a pitching coach and in the Division I level and what you do, even with the NFL quarterbacks, we call it the VOD, the voice of doubt and the voice of distraction. So can you touch upon really this challenge and struggles that major league players struggle with mentally and or even the quarterbacks?
Yeah, all athletes, all human beings across the board that are involved with performance-based anything, all right, they suffer between thinking too much and not thinking enough, and then doing without thinking. And the athletes that have the most trouble are smart kids that care too much. So we actually have a way to measure what goes on in an athlete's head in preparation and competition. It's called the focus band. And literally you can put it inside the band of your hat or wear it like a sweatband. And it gives us the hertz of electrical activity that are going on in the brain, how the brain is actually functioning. It tells us when he's thinking, when he stops thinking and starts doing. And the net result of all of this is the zone that everybody is searching for, and is when thinking is inversely proportionate to the stimulus of the environment. I need to say that again. The crazier things get, the less you have to think. Now, thinking is absolutely necessary, but you can't think and do. And you mentioned it earlier. If you're thinking about throwing a curveball, then you're probably not going to throw a curveball very well. You have to basically, in your mind's eye, you have to visualize, internalize to actualize. And what we use is, like if I was to say, pick out an object and see it with both eyes, and then close your eyes, can you reproduce that object in your visual? You're basically seeing it without looking at it, and that would be the only thing you're seeing. What happens with kids that think too much? They go to throw a strike to home plate, or they should just be looking at the glove. They see the plate, they see the hitter, they see the umpire, they see stands. There's too much noise in the system. So you got to simplify. And the idea in physical preparation, in process management, you have to think to create the process that'll help you not think when you're competing. Did that progression make sense?
Yeah,
So
I have
go
a
ahead.
question. I've had the opportunity to work with Nate and train and see him train and listen to him and how he trains his nephew, who is arguably one of the elite upcoming athletes in baseball, shortstops. And that preparation of how you prepare and put yourself in situations where you're not surprised, where you're training difficult, you're training pressure plays, you're not just exercising, but you're training for those situations. What's your take on that?
That's perfect. And I'll use a Drew Brees analogy. When we first introduced him to the focus band, when he worked out with us, he would bring his receivers with him. And when he was teaching his receivers where they were supposed to be on a particular pass pattern or route tree or whatever, his brain waves were doing one thing. And then when he went to being a quarterback, where he actually implemented in his practice, he was actually in a game. His game and his practice work, when he was actually implementing a throw to a receiver, were exactly the same. But when he was teaching, it was a different brainwave. So what these elite guys do, whether they're young or old, experienced or not, they have the ability to let go of the think and just get into the do. Did that make sense, what I just said?
I'm going to send you a shirt that one of Nate's major sayings is the do. And,
okay.
and we have a shirt that I'm going to make sure you get at the end of this, but we're big believers in that. And that comes straight from Nate's heart, and it makes perfect sense to us. But I love our listeners and having someone like you say that. Nate, I'm going to let you.
And I've got the science to back up what Nate has figured out intuitively. And I need to give you guys a compliment. What I've seen over the last 50 years with coaches, these guys like Nate and yourself, Tony, that relate to kids.
I really like what you just said there, though, Tom. The eyes deliver the message to the brain, which, we know the eyes are the starting point, right? If our eyes aren't working, nothing else works, but the eyes deliver. And you're talking about how, because the brain, if it's not familiar with what it sees or comfortable, right, it creates a hesitation or a hiccup, or basically tension enters the body because there's this unfamiliarity. You're caught off guard. So it's like It's a beautiful way you said it. The eyes deliver the message to the brain because the brain is simply responding to what you see. And if your eyes are not familiar with what it sees, now you're in panic mode, right? You're fight or flight, and it creates tension. Now my body cannot sequence properly. I'm out of sequence, and now I'm struggling. So it's a beautiful thing because, you know, from the defensive side and hitting, it's all about read, recognize, and react, right? Pitching is a little more about pick up my focal point, you know, my target and attack. But the defender is a different world.
If you try to think and do, you're done. So you got to think, let go of think, and just let your body do the do. And then you've got 90 trillion cells that are committed, and the 90 trillion cells already know what to do. You don't have to think it through again. And the key to this whole thing is in your preparation and your process. Try to put yourself in as many games, play the game before the game, and let the game play itself. I don't know if you heard us talk about surfers. Surfers have this innate capacity to actually implement what we just said, because you're out there fighting against the surf and Mother Nature. And when that happens, you can't really think about catching a wave. If you don't catch the wave, you don't catch it. So that lesson, and remember,
and you can't try harder. I was just surfing a few minutes ago. You can't try hard to catch the wave. You can't try hard to throw a strike, right? You gotta act like you're
when someone
hunting
says
butterflies.
focus, or if someone tells you to focus or concentrate, you're not going to get it done because the focus or the concentrate has to precede the action. And if you can't, you've got to let go of the think and do the do.
Tom, I want you just briefly, we just have a few minutes. If you could just talk about, we call it the VOD, the voice of doubt, and the voice of confidence, the VOC. So Nolan Ryan was a great self-talker, and we talk about filling your mind with confidence, and Nolan was great at it. Can you talk just briefly about trigger words or trigger phrases, you know, the communication that you have with yourself?
Sure, and I'll try to make it as brief as I can. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Your 90 trillion cells are going to do whatever your think is. And it can't recognize a don't do or a do. All right, what it does say to itself, okay, here's what 90 trillion cells need to do. So affirmations are what I think what you're talking about, but the affirmation has to be in a third person. Ricky Henderson did the best of anybody I've ever talked to. Nolan was right behind him. When Ricky talked, Ricky would say, Ricky be good. Ricky be the best. Ricky be the best base stealer. Ricky can dance. Ricky can hit. Nolan and Ryan, after every pitch, he'd throw it, the ball comes back from the catcher, and he'd walk up to the rubber going, come on, Nolan, you can do this. Yes, you can. Come on, Nolan. When you personalize the message to yourself, you line up, again, 90 trillion cells that are saying, okay, what do you want me to do? And then if you can give yourself the visual of the positive outcome, then you step up and turn it loose and your body will take care of itself. So the bottom line there is we have kids that are judged by failure. They're judged by outcome, that think more about not trying to fail, not striking out, not throwing a strike. I don't want to walk this guy. When the 90 trillion cells are going to do exactly what you tell it not to.
That's
So
awesome.
it has to be a positive message. It has to be a positive think and feel.
And Tom, we say commit to the do, not the did, not the don't. Commit to the do. So what we like to do is create everything into a melody line because the mind and heart remember melodic flow and they remember hooks. So in hit songs, you never forget it once you hear it, and that's a hit song because of the melodic flow. So what we seek to do as coaches and trainers is we take everything that we believe in and we create them into melodic flows. So we say commit to the do, not the did, not the don't. Commit to the do, commit to the do.
What you just did, music, math, pitching, and hitting, all are the same mental activity. And the rhythms involved, the riffs in music, because if I remember right, you're either a songwriter or you do something with it. Yeah. So, that's why you're a good baseball player, because numbers, music, and sports are exactly the same.
One special piece that Tom brings to the table is not only the development of the delivery but he develops the complete being, body, soul, mind, the whole package, the complete circle, and getting into the mental game. And he's talking about the do, and it's something that we talk about all the time. And the do, and the masters of the game simplify the complex by focusing the mind simply on the main thing. And most players are so distracted by the VOD, the voice of drama, or the voice of distraction, they cannot even focus on the main thing, which is the do. Make this pitch, make this play, hit this ball hard. So the simplicity of focusing on the do, and the body literally seeks to accomplish what the mind thinks and pictures. So whatever I'm thinking and picturing at the time, Tom's talking about the 90 trillion cells. And we say, if the mind is right, all the forces in the body work together to accomplish the goal of the activity. So if my goal is in my mind, the main thing to focus on making this pitch or making this play, now all the trillion cells are focused and they're all working for me. But it goes back to get your mind right. We call that the 95-5, which 95% of the game is physical. The 5% mental controls the 95. So really it's a mental game. Get your mind right. So committing to the do. And I love Tom's talking about the numbers, right? Music and the movements on the field all equate. It's the same rhythm. It's a rhythm. And this is a game of rhythm. And now, in our later years of coaching, we've really learned to understand the importance of rhythm. So rhythm, and I know Tom spends so much time working with Tom Brady with the rhythm of the quarterback, the rhythm of the pitchers.
Very few people talk about what you have said in this whole conversation.
Well, you asked earlier, why do the Bradys and the Breezes and the Nolan Ryans and the Randy Johnsons come to work with us, to come work with me? It's for that reason. We add the why. We're the why guys. We can actually give you research and quantification to what other people are just guessing at.
You're 100% right, but the thing that I think is interesting, because I know a lot of people that are professional coaches, and just because you're a professional coach doesn't mean you're a great coach.
Right.
And the things that you're talking about and the things that Nate believes in, those are places that are scary for coaches to dive into. One, because they don't spend enough time on it, or they don't want to spend enough time on it. And those are the things where I already know your relationship with Tom Brady just from the fact that he's the best in the world and he doesn't have to go to anybody unless he has a desire to get better, and knowing that you're going to tell him what he needs to hear and what he needs to do. And it's a lifestyle. And very few people embrace what you're talking about and what Nate talks about, because those are the separators, and those are the things that are going to make kids great people, successful, stay in sport longer. All those things that
all
matter.
the things that our society is programming out of kids.
Absolutely.
So, and then what makes Nate special is his authenticity. And the kids pick up on it. I call it dogs and kids know what coaches are there for them and which coaches are not there for them. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons Nate has been as good as he's been for as long as he's been, is when you're talking to Nate, you're getting everything that he has.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a lifestyle, and it's we see quantitative successes everywhere we go, and the thing that separates is, and this is my passion, I hope you and Nate get to talk about, is what makes a master teacher, because there's very few of them out there.
Yeah, I agree. And when you find one, you got to hang out and learn as much as you can from them. I want to give you the trail that I've been researching for the last 50 years. It goes like this, and it's linear: chaos, order, behavior, belief, experience, knowledge, wisdom. There's your continuum. So you have chaos. Every day you wake up, you have intrapersonal and interpersonal chaos. We're trying to find order to that chaos. And underneath that chaos, you have pathway and curriculum. That's where Nate is so good. He identifies the pathway and comes up with a curriculum. Then once you've got that figured out, then you go to experience, all right? Pardon me, then you go to behavior and then belief. People used to think that belief led to behavior, but your behaviors develop your belief system. Once you've got behavior and belief, then you get into experience. Now I can shorten your experience learning curve by telling you what might happen when you experience something, but you have to experience and take ownership of your experiences. You can't be injected. You have to experience. Knowledge is when you can compare somebody's information with your experience. And then wisdom is when you run across someone like Nate or hopefully myself.
Yeah.
I don't know what I know until the button is hit.
Mhm.
But wisdom is when you have a why to any question that comes up. And in today's world, if you're 50 years old or older, you're kind of getting pushed aside
Mhm.
when it should be just the opposite. All these propeller heads, all these stat heads should actually have the wisdom to go with the numbers. And that's why I think I'm still relevant, because I speak the stat heads, I speak the analytics language, but I'm 74 years old and I have that 50 years of what does and doesn't work
Yeah.
in wisdom base. So there's the combination.
That's a beautiful thing. My one of my best friends is the hitting coordinator for the Angels, but he was the hitting coordinator with the Dodgers when they did that mental study that of all the things you're talking about. And he said it was very interesting. He said, I'm one of the few guys. He played center field for the A's. His name's Dana Mayshore. When Jose Canseco, McGuire were there,
Right.
and he said, it was interesting. I grew up watching Bobby Bonds teach Barry Bonds, and talk about self-talk and all that stuff. And Willie Mays was around, and he said the thing about those guys is they watched how the greats did it before them, and those guys wanted to be the best, and they listened to the people that were the best.
Oh yeah. Yeah. When you're wondering, hang out with someone that's really good, because there's always a nugget here and a nugget there.
Tom, can I ask you like two super quick questions? Super quick.
Fire away.
The hand when the quarterback separates, do you care if it actually goes down? Do you want it to just work up for more efficiency, or some of these guys are getting long. Does it matter?
Doesn't matter. Look at Doug Flutie, who for a short guy was really long, but his feet were quick. So
Okay.
I've reached a point now where I never fiddle with the thrower's arm slot. I never fiddle with the throwing arm. I match up the front side with his throwing side, keep his eyes level, and have him go as fast as he can friggin' go with his feet.
Okay. And then I got one more question. I'm watching all these infielders. Their front side is never the same, but what is always the same is they scap load. And if wherever their front arm is, it seems like it doesn't make any difference, because sometimes it'll be down by their foot. Sometimes it'll be up, sometimes it'll be down, sometimes it'll be literally down pointing into the ground. But what they all have is that scap load. When they separate, they go right to the load. So it seems like from the thousands of pitchers I've looked at, that the front side really, as long as they're loading, major league thrower. I'm
what you
on
call the
infielders.
scap load is torque, and torque is stored energy. And if the front side is firm, then the backside, the shoulder, will torque and deliver without even having to think about it. But if the front side spins out, if the glove doesn't stay in front of the center of gravity, then you got guys that are rotating at the expensive direction, and that's inaccuracy for an infielder and a bad elbow or a bad shoulder from a pitcher.
So the guys
scap loading in your vocabulary from here on out, scap loading is just basically torque.
Okay, so
Okay.
when I'm getting that torque, I'm gonna just call it a torque load, so you know what I'm talking about. I see guys
Yeah.
like Baez and all these guys, their hand is behind their back, but they're torque loaded, and you see it all the time. They'll have
Yeah, and the same, golfers, hitters, pitchers, all rotational athletes will actually store hip and shoulder separation, and stored hip and shoulder separation equals torque.
okay,
Awesome.
super. So, Tony, anything we got coming up?
Yeah, we'll be in Utah coming up, and looks like we're going to be going to New Jersey. And I believe Iowa City. So some great stuff coming up. Thanks for coming to our show, and we'll see you next week.